All right, let me give you some salting pointers. I remember in my early days, I was pulling out a draglam salt and I saw my boy Harry, shout out to Harry, one of my old mentors back in the day. He was pulling out of his site and I went over there just to say hi. And first thing I noticed was these beautiful tire tracks that were lined up, spaced out perfectly. It's like he grabbed a string line and ran his truck right down the string line. And as you look closer, you saw a beautiful spread of salt and nothing was overlapped. You can tell this guy was bouncing each salt grain to one track to the other. And that was the first time I realized that you probably need some skill in salting. And that day he gave me a few pointers. And over the years we picked up a few pointers. And I'm going to go over a few things with you. So this is the Toyota Corolla pull-in. And on my right we have the entrance to the parking lot. On my left we have the exit. And what we have our operators do is always lay more salt at the entrances. What this will do is, as your Toyota Corolla starts pulling into the parking lot, they'll start picking up salt on their tires and start dragging it into the parking lot. This is great because the Toyotas are salting for you. And it's also really good too because they are going into the parking spaces. And during the day, parking spaces are hard to salt because they're filled with cars. So as the cars are still warm, the slush is melting off them and the salt starts dissolving off their tires. At least you have a little bit of salt on the parking spaces, and it'll help for when you come back at night to clean up. All right, this next one here is the sewer butthole. I know it's kind of got a weird name. It's one of those things that kind of stuck over the years. Typically, what we ask our operators to do is always apply more salt around the sewers. Typically, what will happen is snow and ice tends to build up around the sewers, usually because the snow blade, because of the incline of the sewers, doesn't run over the sewers too well. And snow will start building up, turns to ice, and in time it just kind of gets clogged. Typically what happens is after you have a nice salted parking lot, when the water starts flowing, it's finding those sewers. When it gets to a clogged sewer, it's going to get more clogged and more clogged. So we always ask our operators, make sure the sewers are well salted, well cleaned. This way when the water starts flowing, everything's going into those drains and the parking lots are drying up as fast as possible. The next one here is called the inclines, and the reason why we call it the inclines is if you know the inclines of your property pretty well, you can save a shitload of money. There's a few factors that are involved. One is the timing of when you started to salt, the type of snow. If it's more of a fluffy snow, will be better. Even the temperatures the next morning. And typically what we try to do is we will start with the early application early in the night, and we will try to salt the top of the perimeter of the parking lot. As soon as that salt starts activating, you'll get a nice flow of water starting to run into the sewers. Worst case is you can always come back early in the morning right before the parking lot opens, and worst case you can just salt where it hasn't really activated. Okay, this next one here is called the dovetail. The entrances are the most important spot of the parking lot. It's the first thing the building owner is going to see when they pull in. Is it the end of the world if they don't salt the corners? No, but we'd like to have all of our corners nice and clean. As you're exiting the parking lot, as the dovetail gets wider and wider and wider, you'll start cranking the spinner to 6, 7, 8, and it'll start hitting the edges of the dovetail on your way out. And don't forget to turn your spinner off before you exit the parking lot. All right, next one is salt calibration, and by far it is the most important one. Calibrating your salters in the beginning of the season is is super important, especially if you have a pretty big fleet of trucks. How we calibrate our salters is before the season starts, we'll go to our salt dome with all of our trucks, all of our salters, and we'll calibrate our salters. And what we're trying to do is figure out the speed of our conveyor belts, figure out the speed of our spinners, and this way we calibrate the salter to the truck, and we'll know how fast that truck will spit out the salt. In a lot of cases, the salters, even if they're the same brand, the conveyors are sometimes faster than others. And when we know the speed of that truck in the beginning of the season, we'll be able to let our drivers know before we go out for a salt run where to turn their dials. After we calibrate our salters, we'll now know the speed of how fast that truck is spitting out the salt. This way we'll be able to tell our operators on call it a light salt app, keep your dials at 3 and your spinner at 4, travel at whatever, 4 kilometers an hour. So in conclusion, salting, it is pretty straightforward. I guess the one thing we didn't really talk about was how to actually salt the parking lot. And typically what we'll do is we'll do that whole perimeter thing like we talked about. Make sure you're tucking your ass in all those corners. That's the main thing. 2 styles that I like to do is the Zamboni style for our square / rectangle parking lots. And what that is you do a perimeter, and then you'll do a shot right down the middle, and then you'll go back to the outside, tuck back into the middle, outside, back in the middle. It is my favorite, and the reason why I like doing that one is there's not a lot of backing up 3-point turns. You do your tuck-ins, get that out of the way, and you can whip around pretty quick. The second style is the fertilizer style. That's my buddy Harry's style, and that is do your perimeter, do your tuck-ins, and then you're just chopping up lines right down the parking lot.